This episode of CU Live is brought to you with support from Stoff's Coffee Roasters. Since 1988, Stoff's has been offering specialty coffee hand-roasted right here in Central Ohio. Stoff's is also a proponent of meaningful community conversations, whether online or in person. Visit their website at stoffs.com for the latest information on their locations, or to order online and enjoy a cup of Stoff's while you watch this episode.
Hello and welcome to CU Live. I'm Susan Post, Associate Editor of Columbus Underground. Today I have with me Jung Kim, who is the Managing Director of Research and Business Intelligence at One Columbus. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about growth and equity in the Columbus region. Because I think there's been a lot of really renewed discussion about creating more equitable communities, and that incorporates obviously a lot of different pieces. However, one piece of that puzzle I think that's really top of mind for a lot of people is housing. So kind of want to start there. Having spoken with a lot of business owners over the years, Central Ohio and its relatively low cost of living frequently comes up as a big advantage to doing business in the region. However, with the growth, we've seen rising rental costs, rising home prices, and we even published an article recently about how the affordable housing construction is not meeting demand. So what are some steps that we need to take now to kind of ensure that Central Ohio remains a reasonably affordable region?
One of the things we really have to look at in terms of housing is just our overall supply situation.
Right.
The amount of permits, housing starts, construction, it has not kept up with the growth that has happened. That's a problem in other cities that we see, right. But even trying to compare apples to apples, like the ratios in Columbus are pretty weak compared to other metros. Like we just need more housing in general, first of all. When we think about equity and just the way things have turned out with COVID, and people talk about the K-shaped recovery, for those of us who own, generally it's been pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have seen housing prices rise, and that's great for us.
At
right.
How much?
Right, but for those who don't own, that's a challenge as rents increase, and if they want to own, how they get on the ladder now compared to even before COVID.
Because I think it's been such a seller's market in Columbus the last several years. Even, I bought a house in 2017, and even then it was insane. And I think that it's just gotten worse over the last few years, it seems. Yeah,
there just isn't enough stock, and I think we need to look at other options, like what Minneapolis has done, right? They kind of banned single-family zoning, saying, if a single-family plot is now up for redevelopment or something new, then it has to be at least a 3-unit, housing facility. So I don't know if that's the solution, and they know that that's not the only piece of the puzzle. There are other things that need to be done, but I think we have to think a little bit more.
There are creative ideas like that out there. Yeah.
Definitely.
So finding affordable housing, whether that's renting or owning, can also have kind of a direct impact on the job opportunities that folks have access to. Looking at some of Columbus's core industries, logistics, we have a lot of, national brand headquarters, manufacturing. A lot of these job opportunities kind of lie outside the central core of the city. And we'll talk about transportation here in a minute. But how can we kind of spur quality job growth, especially in underserved areas?
Ohio as a state, and for the communities within the state, that we're reckoning with now with what's happened with COVID and work from home, is it raises questions about kind of the sustainability of this income tax model where, you're taxed based on where you work, right? And if you live somewhere different, maybe they'll credit that back 100% or most of it. Now you have this situation where a lot of us are working at home, and it might be a different municipality, and it raises questions about, where does your tax money go to? I'm hoping that, as people think about that does help address the imbalances we see in terms of where jobs are and where housing is, right? And hopefully bring things together a little bit as we figure out kind of that income tax situation. it is an important issue for the region. There are a lot of jobs that aren't accessible by public transportation. We do have certain examples like Rickenbacker, New Albany Business Park, where they've partnered with CODA to kind of extend transportation options there. But we need more of that.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about maybe the role that small business can kind of play in this. We've seen a lot of support for Black and minority-owned businesses recently. So how can we kind of sustain that to kind of create equitable growth in some of these communities?
There's a lot of layers to this. I think one is just the financial support in terms of banking and other financial options to support the startup and growth of minority-owned or women-owned, veteran-owned businesses. Another is for whether it's government or business to look at their procurement policies, like how are they sourcing goods, services. I know the city of Columbus is looking at that right now. You have a lot of stories of white-owned firms that started small and then grow, and then at the same time, their Black-owned counterpart might reach a certain limit and stop. And it's not to say that the firm that grew, the people didn't work hard, that they didn't merit that, but it does raise questions about what kinds of opportunities are coming to other businesses.
So do you want to come back to that kind of transportation piece?
Sure.
And you mentioned a couple of examples of things kind of outside that 270, and looking at Franklin County specifically, there are a lot of jobs in these suburban communities. However, they're inaccessible without reliable transportation. And, you mentioned the CODA does do a couple of routes out to these spots. But what role do you see better public transportation playing in kind of this continued equitable growth of the region?
And public transportation is key. And at the same time, I think we have to kind of get outside that traditional box of public transportation. It's not just about the bus system. People have, dreamed about light rail for a while, but it's not really about that. And you see where the technology is going, and I think the options are opening up for whether it's ride sharing or some sort of shuttle pool and things like that. That fits better into the way a lot of suburbs have developed to date, right? And so you can do that more effectively in terms of cost as well as service, rather than trying to put on a full-on bus service. Or
just kind of looking at some of these smaller, localized neighborhood solutions versus going all in on light rail. Which what are some other factors you think are going to continue to be important in ensuring that Central Ohio continues to grow, but does so in a way that's accessible to all?
One thing about growth and equity that I think people really need to realize is that you can't achieve progress on economic equity without growth. If the growth isn't happening, luckily in Columbus it has, but for other parts of the country, those are the worst performing areas in terms of measures like income inequality, getting worse. Here, it's been pretty flat on that measure, and most places, haven't seen progress. But to try to make any progress at all, you just need growth. So it's a necessary but not sufficient. I think it's, that's something from mathematics, right? It's a necessary condition but not sufficient in itself to have growth. So that's where you got to think about the other pieces of the puzzle. It's, transportation, childcare, housing, not just for housing's sake, but in a broader sense of, how do you bring about kind of stability to people's lives, if they're low income or, in poverty, just to have that baseline from which then they can, go to work or get training or do these other things that help with their financial standpoint in life.
It's definitely a very multifaceted, complicated, layered issue, and
Yes. So. I mean, we're focused on our work in terms of economic development and bringing jobs in, helping businesses grow. That's a big part of the puzzle, right? If you have a good paying, good benefit job, that helps resolve a lot of issues. Because that family on their own they can figure out the transportation
Right.
or the childcare after that. But it's part of that transition of, well, between where they are now and to that point, what sort of support do we need along the way
to get to that
Yeah,
opportunity.
to get to that.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for shedding some light on a really complicated issue, and we really appreciate your insights.
Great. Thank you, Susan.